Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this event. My name is Michael Droham, and I will be your MC this afternoon of this first Spring Speaker Series session sponsored by the Association of Pittsburgh Priests, together with Pathways for Leadership. Gretchen Jazer will be serving as our Zoom Tech coordinator this afternoon. You've just heard her a moment ago. The topic of this afternoon's event, I am glad to announce, is Fratelli Tutti, the recent and third encyclical of Pope Francis on fraternity and social friendship. There can hardly be a more important or exciting topic at this moment, as the encyclical is an uplifting, challenging, and demanding voice, not only to Catholics, but beyond, to all people of goodwill. He challenged us in this encyclical, among many other things, to participate in the law of ecstasis, a going out, a call to go out from ourselves, to be for the other, to participate in a love enfolding the universe, and so on. Our speaker this afternoon to lead us into the incredible treasures of Fratelli Tutti, I am very happy to announce, is Bill Huebsch, who will be introduced in a few minutes. He will be introduced by John Flaherty. Before we get to the program, I'd like to mention two things. Firstly, I'd like to make a plug for our next event, which is on racism. It's to take place on March the 18th at 7 p.m. and our leader is Barbara Johnson. Barbara Johnson works in Pittsburgh, I think with the YMCA, and she has been working on racism for many decades. So mark your calendars for March the 18th at 7 p.m. for our next event. So before we get to the program, I would like to give a word of appreciation for our technical team who has made this afternoon's event possible. The members of this team are Jim McCarville, Gretchen Jazer, Paul Nettleship, and Jim Ruck. A big shout out and a very big thanks to them all, because it took a lot of work to put this whole event together. Incidentally, this session is being recorded and will be available on the APP website. Now, to the format of this afternoon's session, here is the format, very briefly. We will start with an opening prayer. Then our first presentation will take 15 minutes by Bill Huebsch. That will be followed by a first small group discussion, 10 minutes. Then we will have a feedback from small groups for 10 minutes. Then the second presentation, 15 minutes. This small group discussion, the second small group discussion, 10 minutes. Feedback from that, 10 minutes. Closing remarks, 1 to 5 minutes by Bill. And then the closing prayer. So that's the rundown of the format for this afternoon's discussion. We'd like to ask you that you put any questions you may have, use the chat function for that, and for any comments or questions you have during the session, and we will hopefully address them during the session. And now at this juncture, I would like to call on John Pilar to lead us in an opening prayer.
This brief reflection is entitled Prophets of a Future Not Our Own. It helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything.
This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well.
It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future, not our own.
She went to St. Louis and St. Clair.
Thank you, John. John and Jane. I would like now to call on John Flaherty of Pathways to Lay Leadership to introduce our distinguished speaker, Bill Huebsch, to us all. John Flaherty, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Our speaker this afternoon has an extensive resume. He is an author, having published more than 30 booklets and books on spirituality and ministry, particularly on the catechetical mission of the church and on the importance of continuing to implement the vision of the Second Vatican Council. He has been a diocesan administrator in New Ulm, Minnesota, and a parish director of religious education. He is a pastoral theologian and a college professor serving on the adjunct faculty of the Institute for Pastoral Studies at Loyola University, Chicago. He has been a longtime Catholic publishing professional, including being the retired past president of 23rd Publications. But of all his many and myriad accomplishments, the one I would focus on today is that he is a farmer. A farmer takes what is given to him, the land, the seed, the weather, and tends it all in a manner that respects what has been given, but cultivates it so that it bears fruit without exhausting the resource. This is Bill's great gift to the church, namely his ability to take the rich teachings of the church in the documents of Vatican II, papal exhortations and encyclicals, or documents of Vatican congregations, and to tend to them through his teaching, writing, and publishing in a manner that allows these texts to bear fruit. If you hunger and thirst for understanding, inspiration, and guidance regarding the papal encyclical Fratelli Tutti, you will not be disappointed. And so I'm glad to welcome Bill Huebsch. Bill?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, John, and thank you to everyone. I'm really honored to be among you all today. I'm coming to you, of course, from rural England, where, as John said, I am quite engaged with the land out here. So I think I'm retired, but you wouldn't know it if you looked in my daily journal, my daily diary, but I think I'm trying to be retired. Anyway, I'm very happy to be with you. Welcome to everyone. Y para los que hablan principalmente español, un bienvenidos, gran bienvenidos también. We're so happy to have everybody together this afternoon. We're going to have a conversation about Brothers and Sisters All, the English name of the encyclical we're dealing with here, Fratelli Tutti. And I don't have much time, so I'm going to jump right into it here, and I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to use a PowerPoint presentation, so just hang on here. We're going to get this rolling. All righty. So what I'd like to do is, I can't really give you a deep theological treatment of this because it's a profound document. And actually, we have posted a very good theological treatment of it on our website, which you're going to be getting a link to after the event is over. But what I would like to do is give you the kind of context for this document. And I'm going to start by just asking the question, what do you think gave rise to this? Now, I know that there's a lot going on, but what gave rise? Well, Pope Francis has had three things occurring in his life that really were you could say the origin or the genesis of this document. The first, we all are, wowed by St. Francis of Assisi. And what he loved about St. Francis most of all, I think, was that for Francis, national borders did not matter. Love transcends those borders for Francis. And in fact, not even just love for people, but love for everyone. He had a strong relationship to nature, and one of the events in St. Francis' life that really touched Pope Francis was a trip that St. Francis made to Egypt during the Crusades. He sailed from Italy across the Mediterranean and landed in Egypt. He went to visit the Sultan, Malik al-Kamil, who was the Grand Sultan of Islam at that time. And he went to see him. This is the Crusades, remember, when Christians were attacking Muslims and Muslims were attacking Christians. It was a terrible time in religion, really. We endorsed war, for example, and gladly killed each other. But Francis went not to argue theology, but to share love with this guy. He went to befriend him. And that ability of Francis to do that has really inspired this Pope. Humility of Francis, the willingness to be in dialogue, the openness to people's ideas, these have all been a hallmark of Pope Francis' papacy. The second thing that strikes me is that Pope Francis did the same thing. He went to Abu Dhabi to meet the Islamic scholar Ahmad al-Tayyab, and they met in 2019, and they actually issued a joint statement together, which is a profound statement. Look at the photo here on the screen. They actually became brothers while they were working. When Pope Francis published this encyclical, Ahmad al-Tayyab made a public statement, international statement, in which he said, "My brother Francis has called the world to social friendship." And Francis issued a statement saying, "And my brother Ahmad was my inspiration." I mean, it was really a decision on their part. And so this statement is very important. And because it is, I have posted a copy for you on the website that you can download after the event. You should read this. It's the background to this encyclical. A third thing happened for Pope Francis, which happened on March 27th, 2020. You might remember this. This is the piazza at St. Peter's in Rome. You don't recognize it because it's always full of people. But on this night, rain-swept and cold in March, it was completely empty because of COVID-19. This is what it looks like on a busy day. All right, so here he is out there all by himself, and he's making a statement to the world. And what he did was he pronounced a blessing called Urbi et Orbi, which means to the city, Urbi, and Orbi to the world. These are blessings reserved for very special occasions, but this is what he said. He was looking at Mark chapter 4, the storm at sea with the disciples and Jesus in this boat. He said, we're in the same boat. We're perishing. As a people, we're perishing. We've been moving along. We're caught up in everything. The planet is suffering. The poor are suffering. There's war and division and hate all over the world. He said in number 34 in Fratelli Tutti, the world itself is crying out in rebellion, he said. I have also posted this speech that the Pope gave for you on the website. It's a lovely read. It's almost like a prayer when you read it. It's beautifully written. He quoted Jesus, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" That's what, the disciples, Jesus was sleeping in the boat. Well, they woke him up and they said, "Don't you care about us? We're perishing." And Jesus said, "What's wrong with you? Have you no faith?" Well, the storm we're talking about here is not just the pandemic. Fratelli Tutti is not an encyclical about a pandemic. It's also the stormy rise of nationalism all around the world, including in America. Hate and divisions. Our nation number one, our nation first, no other nation matters. It's very frightening. And because of it, around the world, we've closed our borders to the poor. Around the world. Here in England, there in America, everywhere. Not so much Canada, but in many places, just to say. There's also an economic storm brewing around us. The poor are further than ever from the economic systems of the world. I work in Guatemala quite a lot, as many of you know, and boy, as I see the poor there, I can see that it's very difficult for them to reach into the economic system. It's a storm brewing. There's also a social storm brewing as we finally face our racial tensions, and I'm happy you're going to have a program on this on March 18th. It's a powerful new demand on us. And there's also a climate storm brewing. Literally, storms are brewing. Hello, Texas. I mean, really, it's a storm. And Francis was saying to us at that Urbi et Orbi, remember, embedded in these times, in each of these situations, if your spouse is sick or has dementia, if something happens to one of your children, if you lose your job, if something's not going right, in every political situation, in every situation of our lives, if there is embedded a call, and Francis is saying, to what are we being called at this point? And this is what he said: we're being called to be in solidarity, friendship, social friendship. That's the subtitle of the document. And to trust in grace. To trust in grace. He's saying, listen, we're being invited to reawaken faith. And remember this, in the boat with those disciples, they had faith in Jesus. We're not being asked to have faith in Jesus. They wouldn't have woken him up if they didn't have faith in him. Come on. So they had faith, but what we're being asked to have is faith in each other. And with that grace that comes from this, we can steer the boat. That's Francis' message to us. So it's a powerful message. And out of those three experiences comes this document. It's a powerful document. It's from the heart of a real pastor, I think. He said in Article 8, these papal documents all have article numbers in them. So I'm going to keep referring to them by article number. You'll see this when you read the document or read the summary of it. This is what he said: let us dream. Let us dream as a single human family. This is his vision. Love of this kind can generate change in the world. We are children of the same earth, brothers and sisters all. And that's the title that he gave to the document, Brothers and Sisters All. I'm an old guy. I can remember Pacem in Terris very well. I got to tell you, this is, in my reading of this, and I have read and translated all of the papal encyclicals of my lifetime into plain English. This is the most important document since Pacem in Terris, social document of the Church. Pacem in Terris, remember, was published on Holy Thursday in 1963 by Pope John the 23rd, just 2 years after the building of the Berlin Wall, 3 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which the Vatican played a central role in negotiating. It was the first encyclical that the New York Times ever published in full in the paper. It wasn't considered an encyclical just to Catholics. It was the first time a pope had ever published the document to all people of goodwill on the planet. Well, that's this document. Francis is saying to everyone on the planet, this is written to everyone. Just a quick look at it. It's 8 chapters, about 43,000 words. It's rather a long document. Its basic outline is quite simple: a little bit of analysis, a little bit of theology, a little bit of vision, and then a call to action. We're going to treat this in 2 parts. First, that first chapter He talks about the fractured world we have of dreams that we're losing. All the refugees of the world, 26 million people right now, don't have permanent homes. And he speaks about that in light of the divisions that leaders are trying to cultivate among us, within our families, political division, turn us against one another, you know, using racism or anti-immigrant talk, or, you know, even the desire to build walls. We have a great fear, he said, of outsiders. We think they're a danger to us, these outsiders. He said, but actually, he said, this has just created a world that's suffering and struggling, a closed world. Borders are closed. He said, this is what he wrote. This is from the encyclical. We encounter the temptation to build a culture of walls, to raise walls, walls in the heart, walls on the land. But whoever raises walls will end up as a slave within the very wall they built. That's his point. This is Article 27. So he's really taking on this rise of nationalism in the closed world around us. He reminds us it's always people who suffer, whether it's climate change or whatever we're facing, inequality, racism, whatever it is we're facing. It's always people who suffer, and it's people we have to look after. So the encyclical takes, it doesn't so much frame new institutions as discuss how we can help people. So what is the pathway forward? Well, he uses a story, the Good Samaritan. As you know the story, there's this lawyer. The lawyer walks into a bar and he says, no, that's a joke. But there's this lawyer and he says to Jesus, what do I have to do? And Jesus said, well, what did you learn? And he said, well, I'm supposed to love God with my heart, strength, and my neighbor as myself. Well, Jesus said to him, basically, that's it. That's the whole gospel. Everything else is just commentary. This is it. Go and do this. So the lawyer wasn't quite satisfied. He said, well, then who's my neighbor? Well, people ask that today, and Pope Francis he points this out. He said, listen, we have technology, worldwide travel. That doesn't make us neighbors. It doesn't make us sisters and brothers. We can travel to each other. We can connect like we're doing today here in this webinar, but that doesn't necessarily make us neighbors. We have to admit, he said, we turn away from people. We ignore the poor. I was with a woman in Guatemala not very long ago. She came there out of curiosity. I introduced her to people in our villages, where I'm with Common Hope in Guatemala, in our villages there. And as we were walking back toward our truck, our car, she said to me, that woman that we just met shares a toilet with 3 other households, and it doesn't actually flush. She said they have to pour, they never use fresh water to flush their toilets. They only use leftover bath water or clothes washing water. She said, I live in a house with 7 toilets. She's no longer able to turn away from the poor. This is it. We often don't want to get involved. We have no time to waste on other people's. And this is Francis' point. If we hope to be saved, our only course is to imitate the Good Samaritan. This is our only course. So he sets this up as a theology. So here's what we've done so far. We've talked about chapter 1 and chapter 2, his description of the world that's in pain, and his theology of what it means to be a neighbor. Now, after our conversation, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this vision that he has for the world, and then a call to action. And actually, at the end of this, I have a call to action for you. I have some suggestions for you how you might take this document into your personal life and implement it, actually, make it part of your everyday life. So we're going to come to that after our break. But right now, we're going to go to a conversation, and somebody else other than me is going to lead that. So here you go.
Okay, we are back. Are we all back?
Maybe I didn't hit it on.
Okay, Michael, would you like to help guide through the discussion?
I will help, Gretchen, but I will also need your help. So we now invite feedback from the small groups. How many small groups did we have, Gretchen?
We had 27.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel.
Good Michael and Bill, this is Paula. Prior to the breakout, we did have a question in the chat. Someone did ask why the sisters came out of the Latin when we translated it into English. And that kind of also begs the question why women were not mentioned in the encyclical, or maybe didn't have a hand in writing the encyclical. I don't know if Bill can answer that.
Sure. So the word fratelli in Italian actually does translate into both brothers and sisters, and it is a word that Pope Francis used because he got it from Saint Francis. That was chosen, I mean, in a certain way, because it does sound only masculine in the ear, to our modern ear. And so, in the encyclical, Pope Francis mentioned a number of people that influenced his thinking, and everybody he mentioned was a male. It was Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Ahmed Al-Tayeb, whom I spoke about. He didn't mention any women in that part. He did have women who were part of the process of putting the encyclical together, but it's a pity that happened that way. It sort of distracted the world from a very important message. And I'm all about using language that's appropriate. I hope I did throughout my time with you, but it's a difficult question, and it's unfortunate that it happened that way. A little better editor at the Vatican, I think, would help. And I don't know, days go by that they don't call me. I don't know why. I'm available. I'm here in England, for Pete's sake.
Well, women are used to being subsumed, I think.
I think so, and we have to stop doing that. And
yes.
So, yeah. But.
So a question came up in our group. In the face of suffering, as in Texas, where it doesn't affect me, or people in the group, or any of us on the call here, but it affects others. The comment that you made about turning away from suffering kind of fits in, because we can't fix it, and in a fix-it society, we want to fix what we can't do. Could you comment about Francis's call really to kind of growing compassion present to the suffering, as well as just fixing it?
I tell you what, that's a good question, Jim. Thank you. It's very difficult for us to face suffering. It's very difficult for all of us. And it's something we grow in our ability, I think, to do. And even to be aware of it, or to sacrifice our wealth or our property or even our ideas sometimes for the sake of others is very, very tough. And so I got a request, for example, just to give you my personal experience, for a charity in Texas. And my initial response was, oh, I don't know, that's a red state. I hate to say it, but it's true. And I'm sure many of you also are voted that party. That's fine. I mean, we have all kinds, but I did have an initial response, and I had to get over that, and we did send a donation. But it is difficult to face other people's suffering. It's very difficult. It's easier to turn away. Most of us have a hard time walking into the hospital when we know somebody there is sick or dying. We know we have to face them and say something, and it's difficult. So I just want to, and he knows that. And he's saying, with grace, we have the power to do this. That's Pope Francis' point. So.
But I'm sure that many people in Texas rushed immediately to help their neighbors. I have a brother there, and they took in a couple of friends who didn't have power and heat. But I mean, there's almost like a knee-jerk response with certain people. They will help immediately.
You bet. Absolutely.
It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. But how does it go on, in the larger moment?
Well, in our group, it was brought up, and I noticed it too. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez went down to Houston to help at a food bank. And at first my wife said, oh, what's she doing meddling down there and da 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 da. But I really saw it as exactly that. Is just like, yeah, it could have been easy for her to say, oh, that's a red state, they got what they deserve. But that's not the way she viewed it. And I thought that was just remarkable. And I think she also brought it out that, you know, people had helped New Yorkers back in their time of need. And, you know, that's something that, you know, we can all remember. Is just when people helped us and who they were. And, you know, that can open our hearts as well.
And in New Orleans, when it was flooded, a whole cruise of people went down there to volunteer for the immediate disaster.
Yeah, in our group, we talked about how Pope Francis is asking our church to break down the walls, and that one of the participants mentioned that she has a real big problem singing that song. What's it called?
All are welcome.
All are welcome, yeah.
Oh.
And because, you know, we really don't welcome everyone. Maybe that's not true of every Catholic church, but there were 4 of us in our group, and I think nobody said anything about that, you know, that their church was so welcoming. And another thing that I kind of brought up was the fact that I belong to a campus parish, and the students chat before Mass, you know, and that bothers a lot of people because of the Blessed Sacrament, but I think that the Blessed Sacrament is about bringing us all together in brotherhood and sisterhood. And so I think the chattering and the camaraderie between the students and the parishioners, because they include us a lot of times, is important.
So just to comment on that, Becky, we have to read this document from Pope Francis in context of other documents he's published, and in particular, I think, about the question of welcoming and being neighbors to each other. Chapter 8 of The Joy of Love. I don't know if you've studied that chapter yet as a group, but it's an incredible chapter packed with really remarkable new theology, and it's in the official magisterium of the church now. And it really guides us into how we are to treat one another in our parishes. And I'm eager, and he uses the word accompaniment. So, and that is becoming the code word for the church in terms of how we walk with and welcome people without judgment. So that includes gay couples, divorced and remarried couples, women, our non-Catholic spouses. I hate to say non-Catholic, our spouses that aren't Catholic or Christian, people living without the benefit of marriage, single parents, people of all kinds that we hold at arm's length. He's saying, let's walk with and accompany those people withholding judgment. So that's an important part of this. So you have to think of that larger Pope Francis teaching as you read this document.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that in thinking about all of these issues about no borders and divisions and what causes communion, sometimes it seems to be almost hypocrisy when we speak to that in the church and the church is so divided, and you know, at all levels. So, you know, our parish is trying to work at communion at a, you know, in the particular among our own membership, who have such radically different understandings of who they are as disciples and what that means to be church. So it is this document really is so needed.
Well, I mean, Joanne Paradise, I love you. Well, nice to see you. So the woman who just spoke is Joanne Paradise. This is Don, her husband. Nice to see you both. But I want to say how right you are. And here's the thing. And Francis talks about this, especially in Joy of the Gospel. It's messy. Building community is messy. It's not easy. And it really takes work. And we each have to give a little. And that's tough. It's tough to give a little. And you're right, Joanne, though. It is, to be a real witness, we as a church really have to come together. And right now, even our bishops are in two groups, red and blue. Yikes. It seems like it's getting worse before it gets better. So thank you very much for that comment. Well stated. Wonderful to see you.
Trying to say that in our small group, I brought this up. I think part of the problem is we're too much alike, the group of people that are here today, I would assume. And what we really need is somehow to be able to talk to people who are directly opposite what we think. And I don't know how you go about doing that, but I think it's like the saved saving the saved, you know?
That's a good point.
I was just thinking like some of the things that have happened politically and how, you know, that everybody knows the two political parties are split completely. And so how are we going to do something to repair that? How can we help?
That's a wonderful question. I think you should put a workshop together on that because it's bigger than I can answer in 10 seconds.
Okay, can we call this part of the session to a close? And at this juncture, I call on Bill to present the second part of his presentation to us. That will last 15 minutes approximately.
Okay, just a second here. We're going to just get going.
Mute yourself.
Just sorry here. Just
I'm not muted. I'm not saying anything. So.
Okay, so what I'm going to tell you now, you already know. Pope Francis's vision and his ideas about how to go forward are things that you've already probably talked about in your small groups, but we're still going to have a little conversation about them here. His vision begins by saying, we're created for this. We're actually not created to be separated. We're created for love and friendship. And that is a key of our understanding. And as you all said already, that has to go beyond our own little patch where we are. The woman who just spoke just put it well. We're all look alike. And so we need to though go beyond this patch. And here's the Pope's point. The body of Christ that we receive, we have to remember that at the Last Supper, when Jesus said, "This is my body," he was, of course, talking about the bread and wine, but he was also talking about us. We are the body of Christ. It's one body, not two. And every reference St. Paul makes to the body of Christ is to the community, no reference to the bread. But we focus so much sometimes on the sacrament itself that we forget about the suffering people who are in the body of Christ. So Francis wants to ask this question: who is not your neighbor? Who is it? In the end, and this is he's in articles not in the 90s here, we always have to put love first, always. And the love has to transcend borders. Now, I know I'm speaking here to the choir. I don't have to convince you of this. But this is a very important part of his teaching. And I just thought I'd mention to you today, he's not talking here about globalism, a kind of false universalism. And he's been accused of this by some critics. He's really talking about sharing resources and opportunities with everybody in the world. This is right out of the gospel. It's also right out of Genesis. It's really sharing resources, not a false internationalism. And he's talking about protecting human dignity. It comes down to that. And that's the bottom line. So going on, though, he said, really, everybody should be able to stay in their own nation. We should not have 26 million refugees at this time. All the Syrians and all the people from Central or South America that we see moving all over the world, many of them are being housed by other poor nations because the rich nations refuse to take them in. But his point is people should be able to stay home. But when migration is necessary for human dignity and for the things we just discussed, then We have to welcome the stranger and integrate them into our society. Not only that, we have to love them. This is the main thing that he's telling us that is really the key. And that is the kind of bottom line of his vision. We're all in God's family, all of us. And even the people that aren't here with us, as Carolyn was saying, I think it was Carolyn, who don't look like us. We're all in God's family, beyond our borders. Everybody has dignity, everybody. And we have to give land, work, and education to all. I know this vision is, you've heard it before many times. It's old Catholic social teaching. It's not really new. But he's saying, when people have to flee, we have to take them in. So this summarizes, you could say, his vision. So then he goes on to give a call to action. And I'm going to give you two of these. I'm going to give you his and mine. So his, first of all, it's in chapters 5 to 8. Remember here, we're not just talking about a pandemic. We're talking about a world full of storms. And he's addressing all of these kind of in one basket. So just remember that as we're going. It's not just one thing, it's many things. Here's what he says. He says we should have political love for each other. How about that for an oxymoron? Political love. This is a real challenge. I have family members and close friends, actually, with whom I do not share political love at the moment. And what he's saying to Francis is saying, here's what this means. We have to focus on long-term solutions, not the polls. This is really tough. Oh gosh, because it's all about the polls. It's every day. We're besieged by these polls. He's also saying no one should be left behind in whatever we do. Everybody should be included. It's the common good. This is what political love looks like. It requires self-sacrifice. It requires self-sacrifice. And I'm interested in who's going to Texas and who's not. I'm interested in what I heard even on Inauguration Day about sacrifice. It was almost a liturgy in a certain way. There was a real call to sacrifice ourselves for the good of all the people. This is very much Francis' vision, very strong on political love. The way into this, he said, is dialogue. And this means we have to talk with people that we don't agree with, as you've been saying. And I know you agree with this, but where do we find these people? They're probably right there in your clubhouse. They probably are members of your family. We have to have, he says, respect and good listening, and that has to replace lies. No more lies, and he really tackles dishonesty. No more hate speech. And he tackles hate speech both from the mouth and online, quite aggressively. And no more name calling. No more buttonholing people by giving them some name that identifies them with their false or bad traits. So he's saying dialogue is our way forward. This is easier said than done, my friends. What are we talking about here? I mean, it's one thing to have a vision. You know, what he wants is kindness. What he said was kindness in the midst of all the ugliness that he sees happening around the world. Kindness, he said, it's a star shining in the midst of darkness. I love that saying. It's gorgeous. And this is what he's saying to us. Kindness is our tool. With kindness, we can do things. And that kindness is what we're seeing, I think, in Texas. I mean, or in places. It's one of the avenues forward. He also spoke in chapter 7 about war and atomic weapons. And he's quite clear on this in Catholic teaching. We may not support the use of atomic weapons ever in any case. There is no moral case to be made for their use. So they're to be taken out. And he makes a very strong case for this. He also addresses the death penalty in the same chapter. This chapter is really a good read. I really strongly recommend it to you. And of course, in the last few months, we've seen the death penalty being used on the national level extensively for some people who actually had special needs and who had mitigating circumstances in their lives. Anyway, he said it just adds to the violence and it does not restore the crime. What the crime took away, it has to be removed. So very strong chapter 7, which is tucked into these other chapters as part of his solution for our way forward. Finally, in chapter 8, he talks about the role of religion in all of this. And this is something that Joanne Paradise just brought up to us. But if religion teaches friendship and fraternity, shared belief in God, that is a bad word, fraternity. Bad, bad, bad. I'm sorry it's there. It should say fraternity or sorority. I apologize. Ladies, I didn't mean to leave you out of that. But anyway, if shared belief of God is in the basis, then it has a role in the public sphere. And I think we're seeing a little more religion in the last month come into the public sphere. We're seeing more use, because when it teaches these things, it has a role to play. And Francis also says, we just need more collaboration among the world's religions. And here he quotes extensively from that joint statement with Ahmed Al-Tayeb. And he reminds us from Vatican II's document on the church non nostra aetate, on people who are not Christian. We reject nothing of what is true and holy in other religions, nothing. So there's a strong basis to be made for collaboration. So that summarizes his call to action. And it's made very strongly. I encourage you to read it. And if you'd like to see, I think the theology treatment that we have on the website for you is really excellent, and it really treats these 4 chapters in great depth. I recommend it to you. It's very well done. Okay, so in sum, we're coming to the end of my time here. In sum, dark clouds are gathering, but there is hope. There is hope. And it's all about loving our neighbor. That is the bottom line. There has to be, in order for what we mean by loving neighbor, is more than just saying, oh, I love my neighbor. It's also sharing the earthly goods with them. It's a new vision of this that we have to have. No more borders, no more building walls. Instead, dialogue, kindness, political love. And he says, human dignity. And finally, we're not powerless. He said, let's get going. There are things we can individually do. We can't wait for the government to do it all or the church to do it all. We can't sit and whine about why haven't they done this. It's up to us to do something. But what can we do? We're not in charge. What can we do? Well, I have 6 ideas for you. Here's the first one. I encourage you to pray using Ignatian imaginative prayer with the story of the Good Samaritan. You know Ignatian imaginative prayer. Many of you will know this. If you don't, you can look it up. It's a powerful way to pray. Put yourself in the story with the Good Samaritan. I've been praying with this story since the document came out. I got to tell you, there is a powerful message in that story that we don't get just by looking at the text. Ask yourself, what is the Lord saying to you? And then your prayer should be, direct me to my neighbors. Help me see my neighbors. I have a neighbor here, I got to tell you. She's an old woman. Her name's Shirley. She thinks that immigrants are dirty and filthy and lazy. She's a tough old bird, but she's my neighbor, and I'm trying my best to love her. So my prayer is to direct my heart toward her. I wouldn't have picked her, but she's been sent to me. Number 2, I really encourage you to start talking to people. You could do a guided reading of this, do a small group, even if it's on Zoom. Get through this document. It's powerful. Bring in people who don't agree with you. I think that idea, I forgot who said it when we were talking, is very, very good. Start by saying what you have in common. Be open to each other, and here's something. Honestly, try not to holler at each other. I mean, I know it's maddening as hell to have these, but okay, maddening as heck, excuse me. All right, when you're my age, you can say hell in public, it's permitted. Okay, number 3, take a look at your own life. What is your attitude toward the people at our borders? What is your rate of consumption and waste? Your own. What changes can you actually make? It has to start here. You have to begin yourself. There's no other place to begin. It's an important, we need our own individual application of this document into our lives. That's the key. I want you to think about the people you hate. Oh, you know, the ones who don't agree with you or who for some reason you hate them. I know hate's a strong word. It might not be the word you use to describe them, but think about people who maybe you shun them. I shunned somebody yesterday. Honestly, I was on a walk and I saw this woman down, not my neighbor, but somebody else down the street ahead of me. And honestly, I didn't want to see her, so I turned around and went the other way. I'm embarrassed to tell you, but it happens. It's people we keep at arm's length that we sort of just stop talking to, somebody we've unfriended. I'm not on Facebook, I don't have this, but, or people we just consider stupid or dangerous, or who are those people? Well, go to prayer with them. Take them into prayer with you every day. We really, and what is God asking of you is my question. I know what God's asking. I've read about it. It's forgiveness. Forgive them. And that's something we all have to do. Even liberals hate people. Number 5, study these immigrants, these refugees. Learn why would somebody who has, and most to say, let's take the Syrians, for example, refugees. Most of them are middle-class people like us. They lived in homes, they had televisions and kitchens and bedrooms full of furniture and clothing in their closets. At some point, they packed up a suitcase of their stuff, or they left Guatemala and walked 1,000 miles with their children. What would make a person do this? We have to really see ourselves in the poor. What would drive someone to that drastic a step? Last, and I'm finished. Do something to balance your wealth, because I know you're not rich, but we're all rich, frankly. Act locally. I say, first of all, in your parish. There's lots of ways to act in the parish. There are justice groups, certainly that. Also globally, in Catholic Relief Services, very strong. If you're a Canadian listening to this, the Catholic Organization for Development and Peace. If you're here in England, it's CAFOD. But also groups that aren't in the church, like the Red Cross, frankly. There are many ways, and I'm going to recommend you take a peek at Common Hope. This is the organization we work with in Guatemala. Take a peek at them. They're doing just what Francis is asking for. And so anyway, this is some suggestions for you. Okay, I'm finished. I went 50 seconds too long. It's back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Bill. Have you some questions for us for the second breakout group session?
I don't, but
Jim McCarville, will you post?
Got it. What are the challenges about this story of the Good Samaritan as it's presented here? And how can our faith guide us and direct us as we wrestle with the divisions and issues in our society right now?
Ooh, that's a long one.
So I'll open the rooms and we'll be in for 10 minutes.
Michael, before we broke out, Elizabeth Vasco had posed a question about the difference between her. It sounds like maybe she's a teacher, and she talked about her students, the difference between their perception between tolerance and belonging. And I don't know if she'd like to maybe explain that a little bit more, or have some thoughts that she'd like to pose to Bill at this point. If she would like to unmute herself and.
Sure, I can do that.
Thanks.
I had just asked the question. So I do teach. I teach college students, and one of the questions that, because I thought this was relevant in light of the question that was sort of asked after it, is one of the questions that they constantly talk about is the difference between sort of belonging and tolerance. And so the document, and I was just kind of thinking about this, the document talks about solidarity, and it talks about social friendship. And I think the category of friendship is really helpful for young people and something I've been thinking about a lot. But even within the categories of friendship, they're really attuned to, like, one of them said at my class the other day, nobody just wants to be tolerated. You tolerate a roommate, right? But you want to belong. And I think so many of them feel like they don't belong. So as much as we can say our churches are inclusive, our churches are welcoming, at the end of the day, how do you create spaces of belonging? And in what ways does that document or even your proposed action steps maybe speak to that for young people? So that's my question.
Well, that's really a good question. You know, the let's just say first, tolerance or tolerating people is a bit chilly. It's at arm's length. And it seems at once to be a Christian value, but really just tolerating people is not really our summons. So we would say that the other word you use, those, but is really the word, it's belonging. And, you know, we use the word belonging all the time. You know, for example, I live here in England, but I belong to St. George Parish. I belong there. That we use the phrase to say that we belong to this parish. And maybe that's not always a reality. Maybe people don't always feel that they belong. But that's exactly what Pope Francis is asking us to do with this whole movement toward accompaniment. And so, Elizabeth, the strategy for helping people feel they really belong is to really start to work on accompaniment, students with each other, faculty with students, parents. I mean, it's really the way forward. And so,
yes, excellent.
Anyway, but just to say that that's a very good question. And I just want to say there's a difference between being a friendly parish or school and being a welcoming parish. A friendly parish, they shake your hand at the door and they basically, anybody, they kind of are tolerating you. A welcoming parish uses your name and they call you and you're in, you're part of the, so it's a completely different experience to be welcomed than just to be friendly. And so that you've named something though, Elizabeth, that's very important. And it's all through the Joy of the Gospel. And also a good resource on this is, if I may say so, is Promise and Hope, this book on current pastoral theology, because it's all about building a way to welcome. And that's tough. It's messy, tough work, but good question. Thank you. Really good. Okay, who's next?
Paula and Jim Rook, have you any other questions that have
Rich Signori had his hand up a little bit ago.
Who?
Rich Signori, he wants to unmute.
Okay, Rich, you have to unmute yourself.
No, if I did have my hand up, it was an accident. But I will say this, we talked about in the small group, this concept of common good, which I think is an important one to emphasize, something to build on.
It is. Yeah. And some people fear it because it sounds like socialism. And you hear certain people calling others socialists because they want the common good. So we have to really be clear as we teach about this, what we mean by the common good. So that's well stated. Who's
How
next?
interesting that some people should interpret reference to socialism as contrary to the common good, whereas socialism promotes actually the common good more than any other political thing. Anything else from Paula and Jim?
Nothing else in the chat that I see.
No.
Okay.
In our group, question came up: how do you dialogue with people who don't want to dialogue? And the discussion kind of revolved around you've got to make them feel safe in the group, and you've got to make sure that you're communicating. You're really trying to learn. You have something to learn from them and hope that they have something to learn from you.
Don't fund the bomb, for example, as a way of how do you make a difference?
We had a little snafu technologically, and we were pulled out of a group, and I was just in the middle of discussing the issue of nuclear weapons and abolition, and being challenged with Bill's words about, how do we act now, and not leaving it up to others to always do things. And I was saying about the bombs, do we just rely on the United Nations and the United States, or can we get involved in campaigns like we have one locally in the Pittsburgh area called Stop Banking the Bomb, in which we are trying to get through shareholders resolutions, through petitions, through outdoor picketing, PNC Bank, a local bank that we have that's a great leader, to take a position and not loan over $1 billion to 8 companies that make nuclear weapons. And just using that as one example of, who is our neighbor and what can we do to follow these teachings that Pope Francis is putting out before us. Some of them are very complex, but just like people passing by the fellow who was robbed along the road, do we excuse ourselves from getting involved or taking a stand or doing what I can do? Thank you, Gretchen, for making that opportunity available to the whole group. And we again apologize for our abrupt departure from our group earlier.
I just want to say about what Joyce just said. So there's a principle that beneath what she just said, which is really a key principle, which is alone, we can't do very much. But when we join with others, we can, you think about a snowflake. A few snowflakes don't mean much. You put 1 million of them together, you can stop traffic. I mean, so that's what we're talking about here, joining with other people who are working for the same goals that are for, I'm very committed to the poor in Guatemala. I have been for 40 years. And so I'm joining forces with others there. I can't do it alone. There's not much one person could do. But by joining forces, I can get a lot done. And so there's a program right now to sponsor Palestinian students for college in America. And the Biden administration is going to be allowing them to come back to study. Well, there are many ways that we could join with others. And that's a key principle under what Joyce just said.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps Bill should flow into his closing remarks then.
Well, thank you for being here with us today, everybody. I mean, it's a sacrifice on a winter day. I suppose it's really not. You're indoors, but thank you for this. And here's the thing: somebody commented on this. We do all look too much alike, and I do think let's try to open the ranks of the Pittsburgh, whatever we're called here, association or whatever it is. And let's try to invite in others who are also our brothers and sisters who might not feel very welcome in a liberal, white, retired crowd. And, let's see what we can do with that. I mean, maybe that's a challenge for us as an organization. That's what struck me as I was listening to some of your comments, is that this might be the call of your organization from Fratelli Tutti. Let's open ourselves up and really try to do that. But anyway, thank you all for your time today and for all that you've given the church over all these years of your life. I know some of you have suffered along the way and had to make life changes, leaving vows or getting married or leaving marriage to make vows, or whatever it was. And thank you very much for all of that. It's all part of what brings us together as the church. And thank you for trusting me and inviting me today. I've really had a good time with you. Thank you. Thank you for laughing at my jokes, which I didn't think you laughed enough. Just to say, next time I really want to hear the laugh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for your excellent and enlightening presentation. And now I'd like to call on Anita dos Santos to offer our closing prayer.
Thank you. This is a prayer to the Creator. It's from Pope Francis at the end of Fratelli Tutti. Lord, Father of our human family, you created all human beings equal in dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit and inspire in us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects, and shared dreams. Amen.
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 Thank you very much, Anita. And now a few closing remarks. First, I want to remind you once more about the next event, which is Thursday, March the 18th at 7 p.m. And it is how we can rid ourselves of the virus of racism. And this is, if you like, another way in which we can put Fratelli Tutti into practice by addressing the problem of racism. That presentation will be made by Barbara Johnson on March the 18th at 7 p.m. Put it down in your calendar. And finally, before you leave, if you would be so kind as to go to the chat to put in a word or a takeaway from this session before you leave. And I want to thank you all for participating this afternoon. Oh, there is one other thing that I forgot to mention, which is to remind you once more about the follow-up sessions which Jim McCarville mentioned. They are on March the 2nd and on March the 9th at what time, Jim? Is he still there? I think it's 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. The 2nd and Jim, they can get the information on the APP website, correct?
Correct.
So thank you everybody for participating and enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.